the Project Advantage podcast, here today with Thomas, founder of CX Planner. Thomas, excited to have you today.
Thank you. Glad to be here, Cory.
Well, we had a little technical difficulty at the beginning, so we got through that. As you coming from an electrician background, I'm coming from more of a supply company background. Working through podcast technicalities is not my specialty, so glad we were able to get it all figured out. And to start, would love to have our audience learn a little about you, your background, and we can jump into it from there.
Absolutely. So, yes, I'm Thomas Jarloev, and all the way back, I have a background as an electrician. So I've done lots of general electrical work and also some industrial electrical work. And that was actually where I found so I'm located in Denmark. Yeah. And in Denmark, we had an education called an energy technologist. Yeah. So that was an education focusing on all the installations that used energy. So heating, ventilation, general switchboards, everything. And after doing lots of electrical work, I saw that I was putting the power into the equipment, but there were more behind that. Yeah, so I got intrigued by that and started that education. And it's during that education I found the word commissioning, and in Danish it's pretty hard to pronounce and even harder to spell. So I just thought that's going to be my call in life. Yeah, and then I dived into commissioning. Yeah,
and so how early as you were an electrician, did commissioning sort of bubble up as something that I need to know about this?
So I was fully educated as an electrician and worked a year as it, and then I started on the other education where I heard the word, and that's around 15 years ago now. So back then, 15 years ago in Denmark, commissioning was a very small word, and only a handful of people were actually doing commissioning. So it was brand new in the Danish industry. Yeah. So when I heard it, I had one guy I could reach out to, Ole Theisen. And I called or emailed Ole and said, Ole, that word, that sounds so cool. I got to learn some more about it. And then he invited me out to the company where he worked and became my mentor in it, actually.
That's great. And I think, for so many electricians, here in the US, we're mainly working with electricians. You have everyone from your one-man shops up through your huge general contractor companies that have electrical divisions like a Quit. Even the reality is even the smaller ones can probably benefit from some sort of commissioning in place. But maybe for someone who is newer to the electrical space, so can you give in your own words as you've learned it, so what is commissioning? What does it mean? Why do I care about it? How is it going to help me as an electrician?
Yeah. So I think one of the hardest things is when we have to define commissioning, right? Because they're defining it according an ASHRAE guideline 0 or ASHRAE standard 202 or other standards or guidelines. For me, of course, there are some standards and guidelines to follow, but for me, it's more like a support process. When you find the commissioning team, they're helping the different people on the project work together or verify the installations together. Yeah, because when I'm coming with my switchboard, my cables and all that stuff, well, that's only one delivery. I still have to terminate it on the air handling unit and ensuring that it's the right power and the right termination and all of that. So it's that coordination between the other guys on the project where I really see the benefit in commissioning. Yeah, where I think often in the industry is more seen as someone like a police team coming and pointing out all the errors. But to me, if commissioning is working, then it is a team who's helping everyone verifying and ensuring things work together.
You made me think of recently I had the cable company come. I used the internet through the cable company here outside of Boston, and the person had showed up because my internet all of a sudden turned off, and they spent an hour and a half trying to figure out what happened. Well, what happened was the last person that came to do service in our area on the panel had just ripped out our wire and switched it with someone else's, and they just didn't know that they weren't supposed to switch where those two wires are. This is him explaining to me, but that I feel like even just at a residential level, that's like a great example of there's no documentation of any work that's done over time. And, at a small scale on residential all the way up through industrial where, you're talking high voltage systems, it becomes almost, more workplace safety too.
Yeah, absolutely. So of course you have like the project that that actually works, but also the full safety during the project, but also for the operation phase, and even also the O&M guys when they're coming in to do the maintenance of the equipment. So I think all of that works together. Yeah, and I think when commissioning is done correctly, then it's becoming a tool for everyone on the project. So even though if I was the electrician on a project and the commissioning comes around, if they provide me with some guiding principles and some helping checklist, then I see it as a benefit for me. Yeah. And that is where I also think that it actually makes sense and brings the best value on the project. So it got to be proactive and not the reactive way to do things, because everyone can come at the end and just point out all the errors and all the bugs. It's better if it comes up front.
Yeah, and we see it also on our side, is more of a manufacturer supplier of products that people are using that could be part of that commissioning process. And the unfortunate thing is where we typically will see it is an electrician firm will come to us about a project. We'll work with them on that project. We'll help supply the correct product for them, be it say lights or fans. Maybe they know that it's 240 volt on that particular panel, and they go and install them. And a couple weeks later, we'll get a call that something's wrong. That either the lights are flashing or the fans nothing's happening. That it was working, and now a week later it's no longer working. And often what we find is because in many cases there is no commissioning documentation in place and no process of verifying in a very, I almost want to say like statistical way. Uh, well, it ends up that that panel wasn't the panel that they should have wired into. It was the other panel, but the person who actually ended up installing it wasn't the in-house facility manager. It was someone that they had just contracted to come in to do this one job, and he didn't know. And then it becomes just such an issue for everyone, because now we want to help make sure that things are working, but someone made a mistake somewhere. And so then it becomes a lot of teams trying to come together to not pass the blame, though sometimes that does happen, but more, figure out, okay, this wasn't well documented. How can we all work together to try to improve it and make sure everyone comes out of the day without one person holding the bag of, messing up here. Commissioning solves that.
That's a good classic one you're coming in with there. Yeah. But I think that also highlights some of the difficulties to implement commissioning, because in some cases, well, then commissioning just becomes an insurance for you as the owner of the building. Yeah, everyone is working correctly on the project. Yeah, and things work at the end. So you're going to get that handover, going to get into operation as expected, but then you might not have the right documentation. You'll not be able to operate the building. You're not able to find if something goes wrong during the operation phase. That is also when commissioning comes in, because then you have to write documentation. You know how things work. The staff are trained to operate the building. They know how the BMS and the SCADA is set up. Yeah, so obviously that also one of the more indirect benefits of commissioning that you first see when the building is actually handed over.
Does commissioning fall on the end user who owns the facility, or does it fall on the electrical firm coming in and doing the work, in your opinion?
Yeah, I think it should be the owner who's enforcing it across the full project so everyone participates. Because I also believe that you can come in as the single the electrical company and then bring in your own commissioning process and use that. And of course, that's a good idea, and you're going to get the right documentation and do the right testing. But I think you're going to get some extra value if you're going to come from the owner, so everyone is enforced to do that commissioning together also. Yeah. So you know that when you're going to put up the lights, then you're going to connect them with a BMS system and maybe have some backup power for some of them in some areas. Things got to work together, and it's still going to be like individual contractors doing that. Yeah. So I think it's beneficial when everyone is participating in it, especially in the last system integration tests across disciplines.
And then I guess, we get to the next issue is that a company might have a great process in place, but it sits in a desk somewhere. And they went through the process, they did all the work, and now it's, collecting dust.
Yeah. Yeah. And
And no
I
one knows
think
where it is when they need it.
yeah. Oh, that brings back memory for me too. Yeah, because when I had uh, before I started my position at CX Planner here, I was employed by Copenhagen Airport, that's the largest airport here in Denmark, to establish and implement a commissioning process for them. Yeah. Well, it was a journey, to be honest. It went well and ended well for me. Yeah, but it required lots of Excel spreadsheets and also going around to find lots of the things that were in drawers and on C drives on different computers and backup systems.
And is that how you sort of move towards a CX planner? So I assume, you're in the weeds, you're working a lot of Excel docs, a lot of physical documents where you're filling out data. Um, you know, CX planner is that sort of digitization of what you're doing day to day already.
That was where it started for me, because I had a team of 5 guys doing commissioning and 12 asset managers, and we had like lots of commissioning projects going on, and they were like spanning both from the pure electrical ones, like a switchboard change, to larger new piers that were being built. Yeah, and everything was done in Excel. So I love Excel. Yeah, but at one point, those spreadsheets just gonna like reach and hit the limit of what they can do. So that was what made my look around to find something else. Because if I cannot get the guys to like fill out those checklists and utilize the procedures that we specify, well, then it makes no sense. Yeah, even though I'm like the commissioning lead on a project, I'm full dependent on all the other guys doing the actual checklist and giving me input to my commission process. So it was a need for me like to make it easier for the other ones to actually participate, and then of course give me some better tracking to do the management reporting, yeah, as a side effect on it.
And so, the software, uh, I've spent a little bit of time with your team on it, so I'm familiar. But if you were to look out and talk to people about it, uh, when does it make sense? When do I need to go digital? Because I assume if for example, in our facility here, uh, I mean, and we have a couple 240 lines, but besides that, it's not anything too complex. We're doing, you know, some testing right here in this facility, but nothing high voltage. Um, do I need commissioning at that level, or are we really talking more, industrial facilities where the math starts to make sense? I guess that's probably, helpful for people to understand, like, what is that point where it makes sense to make a jump? Because there's some companies who use Excel very efficiently still, right?
Yeah, yeah, and I believe a lot still in Excel. It is a good tool, yeah, but for the right things. And I don't think it is for managing assets and checklists and doing critical follow up. Then spreadsheets is not good enough anymore. If we have like to segment on where it makes sense, then of course on the larger industrial projects and larger facilities, I would always go with something, because well, downtime. So downtime in the podcast, it would not even be good. So if you can avoid a couple of hours in downtime, or a couple of hours in downtime on some production lines, well, then I would absolutely go with something that could help me to avoid that. Yeah. So in all of the larger ones, always. Yeah. But what I also see that is on smaller projects or by doing like single changes of switchboards in the building, it's nice to have a standard way to do things. If you have that standardization and it doesn't provide an overhead of work for you, then it often is a nice utility, because besides that, you always make sure that you go through all the required items that you must go through. You also have the correct documentation afterwards. Yeah. So it actually puts you in a good position. Yeah. That is not just like a spreadsheet with some typed in values that you could even fake after, if it was. Yeah. So it also gives some professional, yeah, visual elements and documentation over it.
And in your platform in specific, I know um, the team's been building out an AI agent functionality. So what does that mean in the context of what you're doing? I knew, you know, AI is being thrown around everywhere. I think MIT recently came out with a study which said about only about 5 to 10% of investments in it are actually, value additive to the companies who have made those investments. So what does your, AI technology do? What does it mean? How's it really actually helping people using the platform?
In the start, I was extremely skeptical over this AI. Yeah, I got in like on ChatGPT, tried to formatting some emails and that stuff, and then everything started to boom with AI. So I was actually pretty skeptical in the start. How could this come in and provide helping or guidance for me? Yeah, so it took me some time to like actually trying to accept it and see it as a benefit and something I could use inside the platform here. Um, I think it actually started. So when I became an electrician, then for me it was like normal to have the thermal cameras to measure like the heat on the switchboard. That was normal to me. But for the older guys at the company, it was the thing that had come through the time being at work. So when they started, they didn't have it. Yeah. So I see this same is a bit with the AI coming in here. It's a new utility coming in for us. Yeah, someone, if they start working as an electrician now, well, then AI would just be a normal utility they have in the backpack when they start to work. So for me, when I started to like switching the mindset for what it actually is, it's just a tool. Uh, then I could start to see that it could actually provide me some extra benefits. Because in the start, I had that thought, well, now it's going to take all my work and it can do everything better than me. I don't believe it can do that for now. AI is a tool, and you are the one who's going to manage it. Yeah. So for CX Planner, essentially, when we started like to look at how can we implement AI, then it become like AI is a tool. Yeah, you're the one who is the operator. That became like the ground principle for it. So we're not like just blindly letting AI do stuff for us. Yeah. The other thing was AI can make you smarter, not take over your job. So as an assistant, and those two mindset, if you combine those, then you can say that as a human here, when we're going to work, we have two things we can do. We can do some mental thinking. That's going to be like the mental load. Then we have like the physical work where we're actually going to do stuff. Yeah. And then we said, okay, if our AI can make you avoid copy pasting from one spreadsheet to another spreadsheet, it might be just a minor thing. But if that minor thing can be offloaded to our AI, then you will save, let's say, 30 seconds 5 times a day. Well, those 30 seconds 5 times a day, they're going to stack up.
It adds
If you
up. It
also,
really does add up.
it does every day, and besides it adds up. So you're going to save some time. You also going to remove some of those like the boring work. So imagine that you've done that resistant test or whatever else that you've done on site. Then you got to report it somehow. Might take a picture and you're going to describe what was in this picture. If someone does that for you, because you've done the critical thinking, you looked, was it the right values? Did you measure correctly? If you did that, well, then the output, let someone else do the formatting and send it for you. Yeah. So a lot of the background or the mindset for how we do AI, that is just to offload the users, so they can actually do what matters on site instead of doing the manual, non-critical thing.
And you bring up such a key point, which is that, particularly for this industry, for electricians, I would say most tradespeople, AI is not coming for their jobs. Uh, where AI will come in as a value added tool, similar to, as you said, when you first started out and you were using the cell phone as a value added tool for your work, whereas some of the older generation may not have been. Um, we will continue having these sorts of advancements, but it's a different type of advancement than maybe some other industries might be experiencing, and that's a good thing. It's another reason why, uh, for anyone listening who hasn't told their kids that they might want to consider trade school instead of, you know, 4-year college that's $100,000 a year in the United States, it's a really great option. And, all of these advancements happening are going to make it that much better and much probably more lucrative of a career as well, because the scope of what an electrician can do is now expanding because I have more time, I can be more strategic and, really make a much larger impact on businesses as these tools become more and more powerful.
I think that's the right mindset to have. And that is also how we can make the most value out of it as it is right now. And also what we're going to see in the coming years, because it's not going to stop here. So we got to be open for it. Yeah, we just got to do it the right way when it comes to us.
So looking forward, um, what do you see sort of in the market moving forward in 2026 and going forward in terms of commissioning? Is the entire market moving towards more of a digital platform build? Is there a lot of holdout in the market? What are you and the team seeing?
So we definitely see more like an asset approach or asset focus on our clients. And that is like to have that asset. Yeah. So when you add let's say you're going to add that switchboard in CX Planner. Yeah. Then you will not like sit yourself and copy paste in what is the actual values and what is like the warranty period and all of that stuff. You're just going to point at the document, including it, or at the website having it. Then it's going to fill out all of that data for you. Yeah. Then you're going to have that switchboard with all the corresponding data. And then that asset, that switchboard, will follow you through the project, but also into the maintenance phase. Yeah. So we see that these like digital tools, not just providing you with the documentation that you've done your resistance test during the construction phase, but also actually provide the client with some real data that it can take over in the coming phases of the building.
And so what about so that person who, is apprehensive about maybe moving to a new platform. They've been doing it the same way in the facility for years. Let's assume they have a commissioning system. I mean, if you were talking to someone, what is sort of the value add pitch, if you will, of why now is the time to make that switch. And we went through this too on a number of different platforms where, we were doing something one way or a more manual way and, have had conversations where sometimes it made sense to make the switch. Sometimes we decided to hold out until the technology got better. And it's always a trade-off discussion in for someone on the team.
It is absolutely, and I like the last thing you said by waiting till the technology is ready, because of course it needs to be ready. We don't need to change just to change, but the same goes with the other side mindset. You don't have to stay just to stay. Yeah, you got to think if everyone else is moving forward with something, well, then there might be a reason for them doing it. And if everyone is moving forward and everyone is like saving, they say just half an hour every day that they can use in something else. That means they can like, the pricing goes down. They have more time to do extra tenders. So all of that saved element, whether it's time or more professional reporting, if everyone else is doing it, well, you're going to be left behind if you're not going to join in and take the new tools that's on the market. Yeah. So that goes for all the tools that ever comes around here. Yeah. You got to dive in and use them, just like the mobile phone or the thermal camera. Yeah.
And you don't need to be the first one through the gate, but you don't want to be the last one through the gate either.
That's correct. Yes.
So just looking, at your customers, is there a good do you have a good story or a particular customer story that comes to mind that might be worth sharing?
Which one then? So we have an that's more into a little more into the controls contract. I've also done a lot of electrical work. They are engaging with our commissioning software, but they're using it as their own quality assurance and quality control software too. So that means for them, commissioning, of course, something you got to do, and especially on larger projects. But on all of the projects, they're going to do normal QA and QC. So they're just taking the base principles from commissioning, so checklist and asset overview and reporting, and then push that back into the QA and QC processes. To me, that makes totally sense because it's the same principles. You have some verification and some documentation. And whether you're going to call it QA or going to call it commissioning, of course, there's a couple of minor differences, but you can still go in that direction. So to me, that's like a fantastic approach of using a tool, maybe a little broader than what we actually sold it in as. Yeah, but the concept of doing that, that's a fantastic one, I think.
And how about, so on your website, I see, the team works with CBRE, who we also work with on a number of their industrial projects, also some of their commercial projects as well. How is their team using the platform?
So especially for CBRE, we have them they're largely here in Denmark at the moment, and there's a lot of electrical charging stations for the vehicles all over the country. Yeah, so that is a core part there, using it for both like cable laying and also for the main charging stations. Yeah, and full documentation, and then you have the documentation and also the maintenance documentation laid on live for those charging stations.
Well, I do find that their teams tend to be at the leading edge. So props to the CBRE workplace solution teams and their industrial solutions teams for being on the cutting edge.
Nice. Yeah.
So, Thomas, so just thinking, forward, over the next couple of years, I mean, where do you see, the platform going? What sort of innovations are in the pipe? What would you expect to be coming down the line in terms of maybe functionality that, teams have been asking for that is in development, but not necessarily there today?
We can see, so besides like that assets going to be like enriched during like the project and then go into maintenance, we also have a lot of clients coming in that want to do like more existing building status or existing building commissioning. Yeah, so to have that building might be performing a little so and so, but then going through that building and registering all the assets that is currently inside the building. Yeah, so that's also one of the areas that we see that is topping up on our radar. Yeah. Then for the general main industry, then of course the data centers. Yeah, the data centers is a wild one at the current states here. Yeah, and I think that's going to continue during this year and also the coming years here. Yeah, for our feature base within both of those, then it is to take the full QA QC going into commissioning, and then you're going to transport that over to whatever system the owner has, or let them actually continue to use CX Planner as the asset and maintenance system for them. Yeah, because you don't have to move them further. You have like an asset base, and then you guys are going to attach some recurrent checklists for the maintenance parts.
All right. Well, Thomas, appreciate you joining the show today. Anyone who's interested in commissioning, how can they learn more about commissioning generally, if maybe it's something they've thought about starting to work on? Maybe they're already doing it and have been thinking about going digital. Where can they learn more about commissioning and CX Planner, and what's the best way to get in touch?
So they should definitely visit our website, cxplant.com. If they're into like commissioning and want to learn some more, then I'm also author to a couple of books on commissioning, and they're more than welcome like to reach out to me personally. They can do that through LinkedIn. And if they're like into like learning some more about commissioning, then we're also open to sending out some books from CX Planner. Yeah, we also got a nice like 101 place on our website for general education on commissioning, but also with a little mindset on utilizing some of the tools in the QA QC phases before the commissioning. So find me on LinkedIn, and then have a visit on cxplant.com.
Great, awesome, and we'll include the links and contact info in the description for the podcast as well. So you can look for it down there as well. Thomas, thanks for joining, and we'll see you on the next Project Advantage podcast.
Sounds good. Glad to be here.